Infatuasian Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Infatuasian Podcast. We have a special one for you today because we have a co-host that you probably know because if you listened to our episode earlier this year, we are with actor, writer, director, and producer Michelle Krusiec. Welcome back, Michelle.
Yay, thank you for having me, Curtis. Thanks for inviting me to come and co-host.
Yeah, so what happened was we did our episode. I don't remember when that was. That was like April or something. It was a while ago, a couple months ago. And we followed up with a little email. And I said, hey, would you ever consider, since we became such good friends during the episode, I was like, Michelle, would you ever consider coming on as a co-host sometime?
And I said, yes.
And you said, okay. No, but I think we hit it off. I thought we had a good chat the first time around. And you have all these connections being in the industry yourself. And I was like, that would be so great to have someone on the inside, a true Hollywood insider. And so we started talking about who we can get on the podcast. And one name came up first.
Was David Henry Hwang. Yeah. And Curtis, this was a while ago now, before podcasts had even begun. I was doing salons, and I had David on my list. He was very high on my list to do a salon, or I called it then Process Artist Lab, PAL. And so this to me is a dream come true. So thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a good. I like this format because it's a little longer. We get to record with people for an hour and we get to know a little bit more about them. And, I feel like when you're just chatting on a call like this, sometimes you get some things that you wouldn't get in a real quote unquote interview, like a 10-minute thing or something. We get a little deeper. So I love it. And we just wrapped up our recording and I was telling you a second ago, amazing. the stories, his answers were great. They're succinct. He's such a pro. He's a really good interview.
And he's a great storyteller. Like, there wasn't any aspect of that talk where he wasn't telling a great story. He wasn't weaving you into a story.
Absolutely. And we talked about music. We talked about operas. We talked about musicals. Of course, plays, TV a little bit. But we could have done 4 hours.
And he's the Asian before the Asians came. I mean, he was, he's the first of so many things.
Yeah, he even kind of joked about it. He said in the beginning he was Oriental.
That's right.
Because back when he started in the 70s, it was such a new idea. This thing called Asian American was such a new idea, and he was at the forefront. An inspiration to me because I thought about being a playwright for a minute, and he was the one that, and then Philip Katanda as well. But David Henry Hwang, FOB, Madam M. Butterfly. All right. So we're going to get into our conversation with David. Let's see. Let me think. So you go way back with him?
Yeah. David and I, we met back in 2010 when I was doing my solo show Made in Taiwan.
Okay.
And he came to see the show, and he subsequently cast me in the show Chinglish in the international tour. And I worked with him on another project, his workshop of Kung Fu. He was writing that at the time. And he took a bunch of us out to tea, and it was just one of these memories that really stands out in my mind because he was never a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
He was just always one of us.
Amazing. Yeah. No, really, really great guy. Great stories, great career. So we'll get to our chat with David Henry Hwang right after this. David Henry Hwang is a Tony Award-winning playwright, screenwriter, and librettist. Am I saying that correct?
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Celebrated for his groundbreaking exploration of identity, race, and the Asian American experience. Best known for his masterpiece M. Butterfly, he is also a 3-time Pulitzer Prize finalist and a Grammy-winning opera librettist. It is with immense pleasure that we welcome David Henry Hwang.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. And you know Michelle.
Yes, we've worked together, and it's so great to see you again.
David and we met around 2010 when I was doing my show as part of the Fringe, New York, the Fringe Festival.
Uh-huh.
And he saw my show, and I have this very specific memory of David because he took a bunch of Asian American artists, including myself, to tea. I don't know if you remember this, David.
I don't actually remember this.
But we met for tea at a fancy lobby hotel, and you paid for it. And I just
Well,
thought
I feel like I'm supposed to do that. So,
it was such a generous gesture, but you felt so a part of us, one of us, and I just thought you were the coolest guy in the world
oh,
because
well,
you
thanks.
are.
Thanks.
So
And I'm Chinese, so I'm supposed to grab the check.
there maybe we might have Chinese check fight, but there was a bunch of young artists, so I think we were all broke. You were
Right. I mean,
you
not
were
great, but
you were
it's
the
good you're
guy.
not broke now.
No. Just hanging on by a thread with this economy.
There's that.
But yes, and we worked on Chinglish together
Hmm.
and a workshop of Kung Fu.
Right. And we went to Hong Kong together to do Chinglish. And anyway, we've had a long and happy history. And now we get to add this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a slight. I might have a connection with you, David. I'm not sure. I teach high school at Galileo High School in San Francisco.
Hmm.
Did you know Mel Esqueda?
Yeah. Yeah. Mel worked at the Asian American Theater Company in San Francisco in the early years.
Yeah.
I don't know that we ever worked together, but I saw his work and our paths probably crossed.
Yeah. So I taught with him for a few years before he passed. So that was kind of cool. So
Yeah,
a little connection, not a direct connection, but a little connection.
it's a good one.
Yeah. Where are you calling in from today?
I am at home in Brooklyn, New York, and we are dealing with bad air quality from
That's right.
the wildfires. However, oddly, the sky is quite blue, so I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah, we know about smoke out here. We've had our share.
Yeah, sometimes it does make the sky brilliant, which is odd, but yeah.
Yeah. This world we're in, kind of crazy. We're not sure what's
Hmm.
happening out there, but yeah, hopefully everyone's doing okay over in New York and Toronto. Could we dig into your roots for a second?
Yeah.
Where were you born and raised?
So, speaking of Southern California, I was born in LA, and I grew up in San Gabriel. Um, but I'm so old that at that point, there really weren't many Asians there. It
Hmm.
was like primarily kind of working class white, and then some Latin people and a smattering of Asians. So when I go back now, all the Mexican restaurants that I grew up with are obviously now Chinese restaurants.
Huh. Interesting. And-
Oh, wow. I just assumed. I assumed it was always Asian.
Monterey Park. Okay, I'll do Monterey Park, which is adjacent. Um, my parents tried to buy a home there in the late 50s and were turned down because they were Chinese.
Huh.
Because this was before the passage of Fair Housing Act in 1965. So that's how we ended up in San Gabriel.
Huh. Wow.
Because could you buy a house there?
They could
You
buy a
could.
house in San Gabriel and not in Monterey Park.
Now, were your parents immigrants or were they born here?
My parents were both immigrants. My father was from Shanghai, and my mother was Chinese, Fujianese, but from the Philippines.
Oh, you have that in your background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so born and raised in LA. What were you like as a kid? Did you story tell? Were you like a creative kid?
Not particularly. I mean, I find it interesting in retrospect that the only time I ever did kind of a major writing project was when I was about 10 years old, and my maternal grandmother fell ill, and we all thought that she was going to pass away. And she was also kind of the family historian, the storyteller. And I used to really enjoy her stories, and I felt like, oh, I was not only going to lose my grandmother, but these stories. So I spent a summer with her. She was living in the Philippines at the time, and did what we would now call oral histories, which I
Mhm.
then kind of compiled into a 90-page nonfiction novel, which got Xeroxed and distributed to my family, got really good reviews. Um, and it eventually became, many decades later, the source material for one of my plays on Broadway called Golden Child.
Mhm.
So, but other than that, I didn't really write. But it is interesting that the one time that I chose to write as a kid, it was trying to contextualize myself, trying to understand my family history.
Yeah, wow, that's cool. And the theater as a kid, were you dragged along by your mom? Your mom was at East West or
So my mom was a pianist,
okay.
and we all, we were Chinese kids. We played musical instruments. I was a violinist. My sister is a cellist. Um, and she played piano for this very early production at East West Players, called adaptation of the composer Minotti's operetta "The Medium." And I was 10 years old, and I could either go to rehearsal or get babysat by my aunt. And so I went to rehearsal,
Uh,
and then I really didn't have, again, any other significant theater experiences, but, until I got to college, except for playing in the, pit orchestra of High School Musicals. But again, it's interesting in retrospect that at a young age, I saw people who look like me as, actors and as the director and as artistic administrators, and maybe that made it more possible when I got to college to think about, trying to have a career in theater.
hmm. So speaking of college, come up here to Stanford.
Yeah.
Uh, what was the plan? English major? Was that what you were?
No, I mean, I had no plan. I I thought I majored in English because, um, well, my dad wanted me to go to business school. And I didn't wanna go to business school, and then I started trying to write plays my freshman year. I became very interested in that, so I majored in English because I found a professor who let me design a playwriting major within the creative writing department.
Oh.
And also, I could tell my parents that it was a pre-law, and that I and so English ended up being the best compromise.
Okay.
Did you actually tell them that it was pre-law while you knew it was a customized, program for seeing plays?
Um, yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly a lie because you can use English as a pre-law, right? So, um, yeah, and, Asian parents, this is probably still true today, as long as you get good grades, they don't really care what you're doing in your spare time.
This is true.
This is very true.
I mean, you got into Stanford, so that gave them some bragging rights.
Yeah, I get although Stanford was, not quite the elite institution it is now, but still pretty good.
Yeah, you did okay.
But David, was this the program where you got to study with Sam Shepard and Marie Irene
No, that
Fornes?
was something slightly different.
Okay.
Okay, so I started writing my plays in my spare time at Stanford, and then the summer before my senior year in college, I was home in LA, and I saw an ad in the LA Times calendar section that said, "Study playwriting with Sam Shepard." And in my just sort of making up my own major and trying to read as many plays as I could, Sam was a writer who I became very interested in early. So I clipped this thing and sent it in, and it became the first year of what eventually is a pretty prominent event in Southern California theater called the Padre Hills Playwrights Festival. But there were only two people that applied that first year, so we both got in. And I got to study and work with Sam, and a fantastic playwriting teacher, probably the great playwriting teacher of her generation, Maria Irene Fornes, who was a wonderful Cuban American playwright who like won 8 Obies over the course of her career. Um, so, and I feel like that summer was when I really learned to find my own voice, and I learned how to write plays, and I started writing my first play, which would eventually be produced in New York, called FOB.
That's amazing. So basically, like a one-on-one or a two-on-one versus Sam Shepard.
Well, it was. I mean, they were basically there were a bunch of kind of avant-garde playwrights who were essentially doing this so they could um, do their own kind of site-specific plays up in the hills, the San Gabriel Mountains. And then there are two of us that were just like there and tagging along and doing their exercises too. Um, and then, I said I was a violinist. When I got to college, I started improvising, and I was actually a pretty good jazz violinist. So Sam invited me to like provide music for this piece that he was writing, and so I got to work with him.
Wow. But, David, I read that you learned how to work with the unconscious through them.
Yeah. So
Was there something very specific that they were using, and how was that approach?
I mean, there were a lot of exercises that they were doing for themselves, which the two of us then participated in. Um, and they're really designed to free up your mind. And this was a group of writers who just really didn't believe in structure, who really didn't believe in rules, who really were about just follow your impulse wherever it takes you to whatever weird place you end up. Um, and I don't know that we have time in this podcast to go over some of those exercises, but I can send you a document if you're interested.
I would love that.
Yeah.
That could be your master class, David.
Yeah, and I mean, there's one exercise in particular that I always give, which was one of Irene Fornez's exercises when I teach my own workshops.
Amazing.
What an
Yeah.
incredible
I
opportunity.
know. I'm
Uh,
flabbergasted.
I was studying them in college. I wasn't working with them. I was studying
Yeah.
them. So that's extraordinary.
Same.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the advantage of being in the first year of something.
That's true. That's true. And speaking of beginnings, I mean, we mentioned you mentioned FOB a little bit. So it started out as a play with your friends in the dorm, and it was just was it an exercise, or what were you doing?
Okay, so it started out as an exercise at this Padre Hills Playwrights Festival,
Okay.
um, and I just started writing about this sort of double date that I went on that summer. Um, and wasn't really going anyplace, and I kind of put it away. And then I got to Stanford for my senior year, and I had decided because I'd kind of discovered myself as an Asian American at the same time that I discovered myself as a playwright. When I began to work more with my subconscious, then I started finding, oh, I'm really interested in all these issues, like racism, assimilation, clash of cultures, all that. And I didn't know that until I started delving into my subconscious. So as a result, I felt like, I had to learn something about um, uh, Asian American history and being Chinese American and all that. So I became at Stanford. They had then and still have these sort of theme dorms, and there was and still is an Asian American theme dorm.
Oh.
So I became kind of a TA in the dorm. And then as an activity, because I was a TA, I was supposed to plan activities, um, I created a kind of Asian American art series where I mean, this was very early in the Asian American art
Yeah.
scene
Yeah.
because, this was what, 1978? And the term Asian American,
Yeah.
as you know, only got invented in like 1968. Um, so, by and large, people are still calling us Orientals,
Uh-huh.
and as part of that series, I also wrote a play to be done in the lounge of our dormitory, and that became FOB. I took those pages that I had written, started writing at Padua. I then had read Maxine Hong Kingston's Woman Warrior. I kind
Mhm.
of put together the structure of Woman Warrior with this date I was writing about, and that became FOB.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I it's so legendary now, but to think about how there was not like, who would you have read? There was no one to read besides Hong Kingston. I mean,
Yeah, there was
Frank
just
Chin,
Max. I mean, it was even before Amy Tan.
right?
There was my kind of artistic predecessor would have been Frank Chin, who wrote Chicken Coop Chinaman and Year of the Dragon, was the first Chinese American playwright to be produced off Broadway. Frank, subsequently ended up sort of hating me, so he's a father from whom I have been estranged. But you know that would be the only antecedent.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there were a few other people. There were Momoko Iko, Wakako Yamauchi, but not very many.
Not very many. Yeah. When did you figure out? So you end up going to the East Coast to study theater, but FOB got some legs. I think it kind of.
Yeah, so I did it in the dorm, and then 14 months later, it opened off Broadway at the Public Theater in New York City, produced by arguably the most important American theatrical producer of the last half of the 20th century, Joseph Papp. And Joe Um, there's there's a whole story about the reason that I got produced there was actually a confluence of art and community activism. Because about the time that I was doing my dorm play, Joe and the Public Theater had produced a play in which a white uh, white actor was cast in an Asian role,
Hmm.
and this led to the first yellow-face protests in New York theater history, like 10 years before the Miss Saigon protests,
Yeah.
where the Asian actors of that day, who were few in number and had no power, protested in front of the Public Theater. And
Wow.
Joe Papp, whose mission was to create a theater which looks like New York, as he put it, invited the protesters into his office and hired one of them onto his staff with the brief to find plays for Asian actors. And it was just about that time that my play came across his desk. So have always considered myself the beneficiary of affirmative action because that's what affirmative action does, right? It finds a social need and then creates a program to redress that need. And this was just something that Joe created himself, and I was the person who got to walk through that door. And then FOB did well at the public. It won the OB, which is like an off Broadway Tony.
Uh-huh.
It won the OB that year for Best American Play. And then Joe produced my next 4 plays, and I started to have a career.
Yeah. Yeah, you did.
A huge one because you ended up doing M Butterfly, which was a smashing success.
Yes. So that was after my period at the Public. Um, and M Butterflies was my first Broadway play,
Yeah.
which was whatever. FOB was in 1980 and M Butterfly was in 1988. So that was 8 years after.
Yeah.
What in those 4 years or the 4 plays that you did at the public, what evolved for you during that time? That seems like a very formative time for you as a playwright.
I mean, it was an incredibly rare and precious opportunity. Like, who gets that? Who gets to be in their early 20s? You wrote your first play, and then most important producer in New York says, "Okay, I'll produce anything you write."
Wow.
Of course,
Yeah.
I learned so much, and I got to be part of, the Public Theater, especially in at that time, was sort of the legendary apex of kind of artistic and political theater in New York City, and they had fairly just before I got there, um, they had done a chorus line, which they then moved to Broadway, and it became the longest running show in Broadway history. So they, so Joe and this is the first time in his career that this happened, actually had all this money, and he put all this everything back into the theater,
Wow.
and was able to do anything kind of experimental or political that he wanted. And to get to be part of that moment in the public's and in New York theater's history just gave me such an education, such exposure, such experience. It was the best education anyone could ever ask for, um, and very formative in my ability to not only have a career, but grow as a writer at an early age.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. When did you first hear the story about this French diplomat who falls in love with someone? When and then when did you put the pieces together with Madame Butterfly? How did how does anyone do that? How do you mash those two together?
So, actually, I think the first person who mentioned that story to me was the actor Getty Watanabe.
Hmm.
Um, and I just worked with Getty in this Flower Drum Song revival that we
Oh,
did at East
oh yeah,
West,
yeah.
and it kind of jogged me into thinking, was Getty the first person to tell me this? Anyway, somebody told me this story about true story about a French diplomat who'd had a 20-year affair with a Chinese actress who turned out to be A, a spy, and B, a man. And the diplomat claimed that he never knew either of these things. Um, so, I thought about this story for about a year, um, and because I felt like, I had this contradictory reaction to it. On the one hand, I thought, like most people, oh, this is an impossible story. How could the diplomat not have known?
Right.
But then another part of me felt, no, I like totally understand this, and I'm not quite sure why. So I thought about it for a year, and one day I was still living in LA, and I was driving around, and I thought, "Oh, what did this diplomat think that he'd found?" And the answer came to me, "Oh, he probably thought he'd found his version of Madame Butterfly."
Yeah.
And at that moment, the idea of dovetailing the events of the spy story and the plot of the Puccini opera, Madama Butterfly, seemed to be an interesting way to excavate this story.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you know you had something as you were writing it? Did you know this was something?
You never really know.
Hmm.
I think all you can do is write something you're interested in. I mean, I'm sort of almost finished the first draft of a new play now, and I'm like, I think it's interesting, um, but no. So the answer is no, and in fact, it was really considered an unlikely Broadway prospect at the time, which anytime something's a hit, then afterwards, it seems strange that anybody doubted it. But, um,
Yeah.
even the cast, of the original Broadway production, they they kinda had a pool going about when the show was gonna close.
Oh no.
Um, and we had initially opened and we'd done this out of town tryout in, before coming to Broadway in Washington, DC, and we got, really quite bad reviews, and the production was hemorrhaging money, and one of the producers, David Geffen, who essentially put up the money for the, show and then partnered with, Stuart Ostro, who was an experienced Broadway producer. um, Geffen wanted to close the show, like, he wanted to
Oh,
abort the show
oh
and
my gosh.
not bring us to New York, and, Stewart, the other producer, then had to abrogate his production agreement with Geffen, and he mortgaged his house to get the money
Oh my
to bring us
gosh.
to New York, and we opened with, like, no advance sale. So, there were a lot of ways in which I mean, it's one of these Broadway stories that has a happy ending, but it could have easily gone the other way.
Wow.
What was the review what were the reviews, and then there were no changes, and there was just sort of a sense from this one producer that he just had the faith, and so, how did that end
I
up happening?
I mean, the Washington Post review was bad, and the guy just seemed that the a critic named Dave Richards just basically seemed very confused by the whole thing. Um, and I I did do some rewrites. I don't think I rewrote along the lines of, the criticisms in the review, but, there's a guy named Jack Vertel who was at the time the sort of creative director for one of the Broadway theater chains that we were gonna go into. And Jack came to see the show in Washington and gave me this note about the end of the play, which which just really excited me. I feel like you have to listen to notes. Most of them are not really that helpful, but every now and then you hear something that just makes your heart beat faster. And so I went back and rewrote that scene, which is sort of the penultimate scene of the play, which I to this day think is probably the best scene in the play.
Mm.
And I think that made a big difference. Whether it made the whole difference, you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the cast was the same in DC?
Also the same.
Huh.
Yeah. Still BD and John Lithgow.
The amount of pressure and the amount of anxiety someone's put their house on the line for you.
No.
It sounds like a lot of people really just kind of, I don't know if they stuck their necks out for you, but I would say that did you
Yeah.
ever feel the pressure of what if I fail these people?
Well, I mean, so this was my first Broadway play, as I said, and when I had the idea, when I thought, okay, what does it mean to take a play to Broadway? I thought, it's not going to be that different from doing an off Broadway show. It's the same critics, it's the same. But I did find as we were approaching opening night in New York that I just started to get this involuntary gag reflex. So clearly, some part of me was feeling this immense pressure, and my body was recognizing this, even if my mind was in denial.
Well, thank goodness. Thank goodness you got it to
Yeah, it's really
Broadway.
good it all worked out.
Yeah. Wow. So many things. Yeah, Michelle. So many
I'm gonna have to use that. Something.
Listen to your body.
That's
Oh,
right. I mean, you didn't listen to your body, thank God.
well, yeah. Well,
Well, I mean,
at that point,
you still have to do the work, even if you're gagging.
yeah.
I
Did you?
guess what I'm impressed by is, sorry, Curtis, is just the level of confidence, whether you exuded it consciously or you held it and didn't know how it was being manifest to to everyone else's perception. But to me, it strikes me as yes, you were in some extremely lucky and blessed opportunities, but you met them with your work, which is very confident.
Yeah, I think I do have. I don't know why, but I feel like I have always had a pretty good level of confidence and a pretty good level of optimism. Um, there's a there's a show I'm working on right now, which has which is based on a documentary, and there's a line from the documentary that says, "The secret of success is going from failure to failure with undiminished enthusiasm." And I think that's really true.
Yeah, yeah. That's true. Something to live by for sure.
We should all post that on our in our
Mm.
mirror.
Did you feel, it's such a huge hit, wins the Tony, such a huge hit. Did you start to feel a little nervous, like, oh no, now what do? I have to follow this up with something else?
Yeah. Um, I was watching, I don't know if you've seen it, I think it's pretty great, Daniel Day Kim's show right now on the new sort of documentary show on, CNN, or it's also on HBO Max, called K Everything. And
Hmm.
it's really about, how Korea has become this powerhouse over the course of a generation. And he's interviewing, um, Psy,
Uh-huh.
Gangnam Style
Yeah.
Psy, who said, it's great. The hit was great for him as a singer, but terrifying as a composer. Because how do
Mm.
I write anything else again? Um, and there's some of that. I mean, I think that what really helped, and this is an example of the importance of failure and what failure does. The gifts that failure brings. Is they had this huge flop afterwards, and then the bubble was burst,
Yeah.
and then I could just go back to being a writer again.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness the order was M Butterfly and then your other one.
And then Face Value, which was
Face
the
Value.
show that closed in previews on Broadway.
Yeah. And then you follow that, then you might make fun of yourself in Saving Face. So it all comes full circle, I
In
guess.
Yellowface, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So then,
Sorry.
yes, eventually I processed that experience in this more recent play, Yellowface, that was on Broadway a couple seasons ago with DDK.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm mixing up Michelle's movie with your play.
Right.
Yeah, all of a sudden I was like, "You did a Saving Face?"
I adapted your movie.
Yeah.
It would have been a success, David, if you adapted it.
No.
Even more of a success. But it sounds like the failure, I mean, was in a way, did you feel, eh, you know, there's the other shoe, so now I can just kind of
Yeah.
create and I've gotten it now. I mean, I think the fear is always, when's it gonna happen, So when it does happen, you do sigh a breath of
Yeah,
relief.
and and you survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't I mean, maybe in some horrible cases people do, but at least in most cases, you don't die.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a little bit of your ego, but other than that,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like a very high quality problem if you think about it.
that's true.
Because it's like, oh, my problem is that my Broadway show closed in previews.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you had proven yourself at that point, so I think maybe the metric is different.
Right. And I had a big hit to kind of ride on for a
Right,
while. So.
right, and that's to be expected, your ups and your highs and lows.
Let's take a little detour for a second. You have an interesting history with music. So you're a violinist. Your mom was a pianist. I didn't know that you had a Grammy Award until doing a little research just now, and a couple
Yeah.
other nominations. What's been your relationship with music all these years?
As I said, I grew up in a musical family between my mom and my siblings. And so I've always felt comfortable around music. And then, yes, I got to college. I learned to improvise. I was never a great classical violinist, I think, but I actually became a pretty good jazz violinist and played in a fair number, in a number of bands, um, which for a while I thought, oh, maybe that's where my life would go. Um, And so I played in like a jazz fusion band and a punk band and uh, and an Asian American band.
Uh-huh.
And the Asian American band was um, with the playwright Philip Kahn Gotanda.
Oh, really?
Um, and before Philip was a playwright, he was a singer-songwriter.
Wow.
And I met him through this art series that I curated in the dorm at Stanford. And he was having his first show, which happened to be a musical done at East West Players called The Avocado Kid or Zen and the Art of Guacamole. So I met Philip in LA. I brought my violin, sort of like I did when I met Sam. And we just started jamming together. And then I became essentially his sideman. And we toured. We would play gigs in San Francisco and in LA, and we also went on a tour to Vancouver and Seattle with two other musicians, Robert Kikuchi Ingoho and Sammy Takamoto from the early Asian American band Yokohama, California. And so Philip and I were musicians for a long time before we were really playwrights. And some of our recordings have actually been released, on CD. Yeah, who owns a CD player anymore? But, um, and we are, I guess I can say this. This hasn't actually been announced and it may all fall through. But Philip and I are doing an event in the Bay Area in October where we're going to be speaking together. And I've been trying to get him to do a musical reunion for about 20 years. And I think we're going to at least like play one number.
Oh,
Wow.
man. All right.
Wow.
I'm there for sure.
But David, I have to just clarify, when you say we were musicians before we became playwrights, you became a playwright in your senior year in college. So you're talking about your puberty years to high school?
No, I mean, I'm talking about my earlier, that was my senior year in college. So my
Right, but
earlier
you must have
years
been
in
21.
yeah, I did more I did more performing as a musician than I did have plays produced, let's put it that way.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Well, I guess my point being is that you were an artist from a very young age. Like,
Yeah.
I
it
guess
sounds
so,
like you
yeah.
were. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see, Michelle, you want to ask your music question?
Oh, yeah, because, so Prince
Mhm.
saw M. Butterfly,
Yeah.
and so tell us that story, and I need some gritty details about Prince, please, David. Give me some
Yeah,
scoop on
so
him.
when I was in my 20s, I mean, and also my teens, the 2 musicians that meant the most to me were David Bowie and Prince. And so when Prince, came to see M. Butterfly, I read about it in People magazine, and I was like, "How come nobody told me so I could be there?" Um, and then he eventually got in touch with me through through I there there was, like, about a week when there's a woman named Therese Stolo who was running, sort of the main administrator at Paisley Park at that point, and there's, like, a week when she was like, "Okay, Prince might call you today." So and, this was
Wow.
still in landline,
Yeah, yeah.
days. So, I would just kinda sit by my phone, and then the day would go by. And, anyway, eventually, he did call, and I was like, "Oh, I've been such an admirer of yours. I've really enjoyed music. You meant so much to me. I'm so glad you wanna talk about something." And then there was, like, silence at the other end of the line. So I just kept going. And, this goes all the way back to For You and to, um, and to Dirty Mind, but anyway, eventually, he told me that he was interested in, um, writing a musical. And this, I think, is a great example of how Prince was always ahead of his time. Because nowadays, of course, every baby boomer pop star wants to do a musical because it becomes a sort of other income stream. But
Mm.
at that point, that was a very weird thing to want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and he said, immediately he was working on a song which would have a spoken word section in the middle. And did I want to write the spoken word section? I was like, well, yeah, of course. So he told me the story and what he wanted it to be about. Um, and I wrote some words and faxed them to him. And then a couple days later, I get this FedEx, and there's a cassette in there, and he's made it into a song. Um, and it turns
Oh.
out not to have a spoken word section, but, he incorporated a lot of my words into the song. So then we worked in this musical. Oh, then I went to New York and I met him. And he was staying at a hotel that doesn't exist anymore called the Riga Royale. Um, I went to the lobby. The bodyguard brought me up. He had a whole floor. This door opens, and he shows up in like Prince drag. Like he's got the heels and he's wearing the purple. And so he sat down, and once we started talking about the project, it was really very comfortable, and it was just like working with anyone. Um, and the project didn't happen, but about a year later, this Therese Stolo calls me up, and she said, "Okay, the song that you wrote with him, it's going to be the B side of the single." Um, and I think that also speaks to, like, his integrity. We had no contract, whereas, it was just his word that and he remembered, and I have a credit. And then I also now have a gold record on my wall, and that is the best piece of fan memorabilia anybody could ever ask for.
For real. Wow.
Wow. I remember at that time, I mean, that was his heyday where,
Yeah.
he was on fire. But you would get, those 10 CDs for $1 if you
Mhm.
and as a broke kid, that's the only time I actually was able to get a CD was through one of those programs, and, that particular B-side, I remember it ends on that spoken word song, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the album was called Come. It was a little later in his it was when he was just before he became the Glyph, and he was trying to finish out his contract with Warner Brothers.
Right.
So, the A side of the single is oh god, I can't even remember, but the B side is Solo, which is the song that we wrote together. And, I mean, I don't know that it's the greatest Prince song, but it's a Prince song, so
Yeah.
yay.
I just remember it stood out because you would play the song, and
Yeah.
then this spoken word thing came on, and you would just kinda stop and think about, "Oh, what is this
Yes.
thing?"
Yeah, it definitely had a different feel than the rest of the
Yeah.
album.
When you are writing lyrics, is it the same as dialogue? Are you approaching it the same, or do you have a different approach when it comes to song lyrics?
Well, if it's a different case if it's a song or a libretto or an opera libretto, because if it's an opera libretto, it doesn't have to rhyme. So, um, so I tend to make up a little melody in my head and write to that melody because then it's sort of a very, a visceral, simple way to get a kind of rhythm structure going, without actually having to count syllables and stuff like that. Um, but if it is a, song, then they do have to rhyme, and I never I mean, even this, the Prince song, I essentially sent him blank verse, um, but I didn't really write lyrics until, the musical that, we did in, 2018 and 2019 called Soft Power that I wrote with the composer Janine Tesori, and in that case, because it was such a personal story, I decided I wanted to not only write the book, which is what the script of a musical is called, but I also wanted to write lyrics, and so I kind of taught myself to do that, um, but also I had what the playwright Lisa Crone, um, called, the Janine Tesori Boot Camp, um, because,
Hmm.
uh, Lisa wrote the musical Fun Home with Janine, and, Janine is just very rigorous about how you do lyrics, about, scansion, which is the the emphasis of a multisyllabic word needs to be needs to fit the music. In other words, you don't wanna have a big "the," you "The hills are alive," you don't wanna go, "The hills are alive." Um, and so I feel like Janine has really been my lyrics tutor.
Hmm, hmm.
Another document on that, if you please, so when you have a chance.
Yeah. We went the whole handbook.
But I do wanna just say for, our audience that you are the most produced librettist, opera librettist in the world, the most living,
Yeah.
produced. So I don't know how that feels for you. Do you feel pressure that you've gotta keep
No,
that title?
it just no. I mean, and I may, I was that title somebody said that or a publication said that about me maybe 15 years ago. So as far as I know, I'm maybe no longer
No, you
the most
still
produced.
are.
Okay, well, thank you.
You yes.
And we can say that right here, and
Yep.
I can just quote it from Infatuasian. Um,
Facts.
but I don't know. It just sort of happened. I because of my background, I feel comfortable around music. So when I was doing my early plays at the Public and I was in my late 20s, the composer Philip Glass, had seen some of my work at the Public and approached me to collaborate with him on a piece. And so I did, we created not a proper opera, but kind of a musical theater piece called A Thousand Airplanes on the Roof, which was about UFO abductions. And then because that experience went well, I then wrote the libretto for an opera that he was doing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York called The Voyage. And then because there weren't that many new operas being written in those days, again, I just got in early. I was like one of the few people in those days who had actual experience writing a libretto. And so other people just started asking me to write libretti. And at this point, I think I'm on my 13th opera.
Amazing. Yeah. And just had Monkey King here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
That was yours. That's actually your own opera at that point.
Well, I mean, it's my opera with the composer Hwang because in opera, really, you look at all these different genres, and for me, it's always like, okay, is who's in charge? Who holds the primary artistic vision? So in a movie, I think it's the director. Um, for a play, I think it's the playwright. And for an opera, I happen to believe it's the composer. So the composer, I think, is the heavy element, if you will,
Okay.
in an opera.
Okay. Okay. Michelle, I think we got to jump down to Anime Wong.
Do we?
I
Oh,
think
okay.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, we're running out of time here. Yeah, so, well, before we do that, I actually, I wanted to say that I got a chance to see Flower Drum Song, and it was such a great production,
Thank
and
you.
I congratulations, it's your second revival.
Yeah, my second rewrite of it.
Your second rewrite of it, which, I don't know how that is in terms of when you're trying to change or you're trying to readapt it, how you discern what you can and shouldn't, and how you're using that in the moment for the reflection of where we are culturally. But something that you had said that really struck me was that you had an interview for it, and what you said was this dream began for you in the late 90s when you first started thinking about reviving Flower Drum Song. And in working with this new version with East West Players, the nation's oldest Asian American company, it is the fulfillment of a dream. You go on to say that in 2001, there was a general consensus that immigration was considered a good thing, and right now it's being questioned. And so I'm curious. Sorry, and then you go on to say, and so to do a show where the lead character is an undocumented immigrant, and the show that asserts that Asian Americans are at the center of the American story is powerful and I hope vital. So, how was the revival of this for you? Where are we now at with Asian American plays and the climate we're in?
I mean, the good part of it is that there's so much more activity and so much more work that's out there by Asian Americans that centers Asian American stories and characters. And we talk about when I was starting out, who were the antecedents, and maybe a handful. And now there's a lot of stuff out there. Now we can argue, um, okay, is the industry as a whole stepping back from that? I think that there's some of that that's happening. And there's the industry, I think, is stepping back from diverse stories generally. And also adventurous work. And when I say the industry, I'm talking more about film and television. Um, but on the other hand, that genie is out of the bottle, and I think that Asian Americans, creators now, have the freedom and ability to choose to write about Asian American subject matter or not. Um, and that is like a big step forward, I would say, in one generation. So that's the good part.
Yeah.
And recently, there was an announcement about your feature film about Anime Wong starring Jinho
Yeah.
Chan. How has that been for you? What's been the challenge? I'm, of course, very close to that subject matter, and I'm
Mhm.
curious what was your challenge in adapting her story?
I mean, I've been working on that script with Gemma and the producer Nina Young Bon Jovi and Working Title, which is a production, basically a studio out of London, um, for 4 or 5 years now. Um, And what's been interesting for me is the way that my view of Anna May Wong has changed over the time that I was working on it. When Gemma first, I've known Gemma since 2014 because she was in the production of Yellowface at the National Theatre in London. And even back then, before she became a star, she was talking about wanting to do Anna May Wong. Um, and I was at the beginning, I was like, okay, I mean, I I had I had questions about, you know, A Anna May Wong and stereotyping and her role in, um, promoting, the exotic erotic and all those things. And the more I've worked in it, and I think this is also as the years have gone by, um, the more I've really come to respect her and appreciate what the the gains that she was able to make, which are enormous if you look at um, what was around and what she was working with and the
Mm,
industry that she was up against in her time. So for me, there's been this sort of challenge of tone, and which, as I said, has evolved for me because of what I've the more I learn about Anna May Wong, the more impressed I am by her. And then there's just also this structurally, this whole biopic question, which is, do you do the whole life? Do you do a segment of the life? Um, and that's been a more technical question.
mm, mm. Well, I'd love to see it. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, same here.
Unfortunately, I think we're bumping up against the clock. We have time for a real quick fire round. So your answers can be as long as you want, though. Podcast is free, so we'll go as long as we need to. What's a play or musical that you can watch over and over?
Gypsy is my favorite musical. I literally own the desk. I am sitting at the desk that Arthur Lawrence, um, who was the book writer that Arthur Lawrence owned. I bought it in an estate sale.
Oh, wow.
Is there a work of yours that you think might be overlooked or has a real soft spot in your heart?
I think it's Flower Drum Song. I feel like when
Oh,
we brought Flower Drum Song to Broadway in 2001, it was, um, a lot of the critics were like, I think, mad at me that I had the gall to rewrite the great Rodgers and Hammerstein
uh,
in the first place. So I feel like it's
yeah,
not quite been given its due, which was one of the reasons I wanted to work on it again at East West this year.
yeah, great. Do you have a favorite post-show meal? You're getting off 1 a.m. Where do you go? Where do you grab?
Uh, Ramen is a good option,
Yeah,
or there's places in Koreatown that are open late.
sure, sure.
You're talking Koreatown in New York City, of course.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I'm not going all the way to LA.
Yes. Yeah, K-Town in New York is awesome. So after a long day of writing and you have to, return to the normal world, how do you do that?
Um, I like to play with my dog. I do like to cook, although I don't have time to cook that much. But I particularly like to make Filipino dishes because I think that's kind of a comfort food for me because because I decided to visit with my grandparents in the Philippines. And then I make this Shanghainese dish called lion's head, which is basically like braised meatballs.
Love it. Yeah. You got to come up to I'm in Daly City, so you got to come up to Sea Logs and
Oh
have some sisig.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. And we end our interviews by asking our guests who their infatuation is. David Henry Hwang, who is your infatuation?
So fortunately, he's a buddy, and he's a musician named Dan Karamoda. And Dan was the founder of a band called Hiroshima, which
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
started playing in Little Tokyo in the 70s and then became the first Asian American band to be signed to a major record label. And they are still active. Still, I think they're coming out with a new album this year. And Dan also has become a buddy and is the father of the godfather of my children.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. This is, I wish we had 3 or 4 hours that we could just talk.
We
Well,
need 3 or
thanks.
4
This has
hours
been
to
fun.
cover your career.
Yeah, you inspired me. I was at UC Davis in the 90s, and I was a budding playwright, and you were the one person that I could look to as a guiding star a little bit.
Well, thank you. What did you write about?
Well, what's interesting is I wrote a play about, so I love Sam Shepard too. So I kind of
Mhm.
looked at True West, and I had 2 brothers in a laboratory in Stanford, and he was the valedictorian, and he wanted to. One brother was more of a militant, and he wanted him to use his valedictorian speech to denounce the Stanford family for how they treated Chinese people, and the other brother wanted his career to go on and be a famous scientist. So, yeah, you inspired me, and I just
Wow,
wanted to.
that's good.
Yeah, hey, you can use it if you want.
You should pull it out.
I should, yeah. Well, I need a little help on the writing part, but the idea was good.
Well,
And I just wanna add, David, with, you're mentioning Flower Drum Song. I have this small and weird anecdote, but, my husband is a contractor, and he somehow was asked to, renovate what was Scarlett Johansson's apartment. So for his client, he had to clear out her stuff. She had left some of her things there, and in the VHS was a VHS copy of Flower Drum
Oh,
Song.
wow.
wow.
Isn't that interesting? So maybe you should contact Scarlett and tell her that, she
Well,
can
I should have invited
continue
her to
your
the
dream.
show. Well, as
That's
long as we're
right.
doing show and tell, here is um the CD that
Mm,
Philip Gotanda and I playing, which again, nobody has a CD anymore, so what's the point? But
yeah. Love Philip also. I was volunteering at the Asian American Theater Company when he did Fish Head Soup with the great Kelvin Han Yee and Greg Watanabe.
yeah, oh, that's so great.
Yeah, no, great stories. Thank you so much for coming on. This has
Thank
been
you.
fantastic. You are such a legend, and
Oh, well,
for so many of us who are, and still are someone we look up to so much. So thank you.
thank you. Thanks for having me. Really fun questions.
Oh,
Yeah, we
great.
truly love you, David. You're really, you're very special to us, so thank you.
All right. Well, I'll see you at the music thing in October, and and we'll
Great.
talk soon.
Okay, bye
Okay.
now.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you,
David.
David.
Love you guys.
Amazing. You know what kids say these days, and I don't even know if they know what it means, but they say no notes.
No notes.
I have no
Yeah,
notes.
they don't know they don't know what that means.
But that was amazing. That was so good.
He's such a special human because he's so innocent still, it feels like he
Don't you?
doesn't have I don't feel like he's jaded yet, he
For
still has that
sure. Yeah.
optimism.
Yeah. And he's humble. He can make fun of himself. But the body of work, I mean, if I were him, I'd be bragging about it every chance I got.
Yeah, the more he talked about his career, the more I realized I didn't really know, just because it's been so extensive, you only
Yeah.
hear the bigger ones, but then you realize, like,
Yeah.
just how prolific he is.
If he was just a librettist, that would be a full career. I mean, he'd be, if all he did was opera. but
Right,
but he
exactly.
but he wrote Tony Award-winning plays. He writes for screen. He's a musician. Wow. All right. Well, let's sign off this episode, and then we have something else we need to do.
Oh, are we signing off? Is that what we're doing, Curtis?
Let's
Is
do a
like signing
sign
off?
off, and then we'll do our intro. We're doing things backwards today, but everyone out there, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that. Go look up some David Henry Hwang. Go look up the early stuff. The early stuff is fun. Yeah. So anyway, everyone out there, go look up David Henry Hwang. Thank you so much for listening. You know how to write to us. You can write to us on our website, infatuasian.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Infatuasian Podcast. Michelle, you got some things to shout out?
Yeah, you guys can follow me at michellekrusiec.com, and I might be posting this on my YouTube channel, which is I think it's the Michelle Krusiec. So hopefully I'll see you all on one of those platforms.
Yeah, you can check out David's amazing hair. His hair is still going strong.
He's he's definitely got like a more hipstery vibe as he's aging into
Yeah.
his
Yeah, great.
into his genius.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. So, on behalf of Michelle, David Henry Hwang, and myself, we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.